Oh man, man! I'm excited for today,
Same here. Yes.
but I'm also hungry.
You're hungry.
Well, Coach Coco over here, Cocoa Puffs. You made me want to crave Cocoa Puffs. Before this, we were talking. I was like, "When's the last time I had some Cocoa Puffs, man?" Did you get that growing up a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those things where I'm like, no.
No, it's like off limits.
It's like the little kids, right? When I used to work with like the little wrestlers, like the little
Uh-huh.
They always used
girls,
to,
they're like, and I'm like, no, no, Coach Coco, Mister,
like, here it is.
they getting too comfortable. I'm like, stop,
You have to have some
do the move.
respect, huh?
Yeah,
That's
show some
funny.
respect for your elders. You know?
But anyways, welcome to the show.
Yeah,
Welcome to the show.
thank you.
Thank you for taking the time today. Go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit to our audience and to ourselves. What do you do? Who are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I was really looking forward to this, and I see all the hard work you're putting in. I watch the clips. I've been following. Obviously, I'm very interested in the fitness side of things and your businesses and how you deal with clients, right? So, my name's Coach Coco. I work with typically combat athletes, from wrestlers, grapplers, MMA, jiu-jitsu, you name it. Whatever's in the UFC and whatever they're throwing down the octagon, those are the guys I'm working with typically. And one of the main things I really help athletes with is overcome, mental blocks, hurdles, anxiety, stress, how to approach the mental side of the sport. So we've come up with like a systemized way to help these athletes deal with those types of thoughts. And obviously, anyone who's played sports knows like nerves is part of the game, right? So it's kind of like, how do we deal with that? How does it apply to our sport? But I don't just work with combat athletes. My background is obviously in wrestling. Like I said earlier, coaching wrestling from the little kids, the youth, all the way up to college, senior level. So, and that could be really any type of wrestling, folk style, freestyle, Greco. So I started really this journey going way back, like 5, 6 years old. Realistically, my brother's 6 years older than me. We went to a boxing gym one day. He's my older brother. He's cool. I want to do exactly what he does. So we start learning the basics and learning the ropes in Yonkers, New York, which is right outside the city. And we kind of, that's how the combat athlete journey kind of started. But I also played traditional sports growing up. It's obviously New York, and kids were back then outside playing
Oh, whoa,
in
we'll get into that.
the street. So everything from football, organized to unorganized, manhunt, tag, you name it, we played it. We were outside morning to night. So pretty much for the listeners, like, my whole life has been pretty active. And, if there's one thing, and I'm sure you guys talk about it, it's like, if you're active as a kid, you're going to be active as an adult. And early childhood activity typically leads to, you know, activity as an adult. But there's things we can do to help people bridge that gap, right? And find what they're interested in and motivated in. So that's just really part of what I do. And, I'm also a physical education teacher, worked in schools for a long time. So that's really where my coaching basis comes from, more of like an educational lens, in the sense of, hey, here's a curriculum, breaking it down step by step, where a lot of coaches don't really have that background. And like, that's no throw shots at them, but it's just a different approach. That's really how I've developed my system to help athletes, help clients reach their results, is through a curriculum, through a systemized approach. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Yeah, I'm curious, like, what made you in school decide this is the path that you wanted to go versus another kind of career path? Like, what made that stick for you?
An educator coach,
Really?
Chris. Yeah. Um, it's a cliche, but just the coaches that I had growing up, realistically, like especially my high school wrestling coaches and some of the mentors I had on and off the mats, like if it wasn't for these guys and these people looking out for me, like my life could have had a totally different trajectory. So
Mm.
these coaches really instilled how much of an impact. And it's like the threshold. Do I want to be doing something with impact or doing something that's self-serving? I wanted to do something that could do both, and really just leave a legacy and help people, just like those people who helped me prior. I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't be the man I am without them. So just thinking about them and then trying to figure out what's the best way I can help people. Is it rehab? Is it PT? Is it coaching? And
Mm.
so at the time, I saw like that using wrestling really, it's not for me about the singles and doubles. It's about like the vehicle. And what I mean is like how you become on and off the mat. Like technique is awesome. Right? We can talk about that for hours, but really you're going to be a wrestler. Your career is going to end. So you got to be a person after that. How could we instill those life lessons? I'm sure you guys have stories about coaches and kind of like what they taught you and teamwork and hard work and all that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole episode where we talked about how much of an impact having a mentor, especially a coach as a kid, really transforms our lives. And me personally, I want to ask you a question on that. So, in at least for me, there was a very specific time in my life, two, I guess, two, where I had two specific coaches in my life. Right, a middle school coach who was a middle school flag football. I wasn't playing, and then high school sophomore year, my football coach. Long story short, I wasn't gonna play because things that were going on in my life. I didn't want to. I was gonna start going down another route. This man, this coach, you know, I could also say he pretty much saved my life. Came into the room, called me out. Hey, you're gonna be at practice. This and that. No bus, no nothing. I better see you. I know your family. Long story short, he pulled me out, and then that made my whole. I mean, it really is because that specific turning point in my life because of somebody really went out of their way to help me that really made me who I am. So I really identify with what you just said. And my question to you is, do you have something very specific like that where you could look back and be like, man, this was a real big turning point, or this was something that really impacted me, a coach impacted me in this way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have plenty of stories, and I appreciate you saying that and sharing that. Because when a kid comes to you, right, an athlete and wants to quit, like typically 9 out of 10 times in my experience, let's just use the 80-20 rule, 80%, they're like crying. It's like a cry for help, right? Or they're looking for attention. Not even in a negative way, just you need to be there and solace them and like talk them through it. Because they typically don't want to quit, but they're thinking emotionally, so they can't think of like why they should stay on the team. And then that's you coaches and just before I get into the story, coaches like want to absolve responsibility, right? Like they don't want to coach, and like being a coach is very selfless and very challenging. Like so in those moments where a kid comes to you and like wants to quit, like that's where they need you the most, so you really got to like help work them through that because you're a teenager, brain's not fully developed. Men's brains don't stop developing until 25. So let's be real. You got to walk that kid through that. So, yeah, those are the kids that you need the most. And I'm sure after that, you were a pretty big impact player, right? I don't know anything
Oh,
about your career
yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah,
in that
yes.
sport. So those are the guys who usually, it's like not politically correct, but that are going to do the best job for you. The kids who are struggling
That's
because
funny.
they need
Yeah,
it the most.
that is
Mm.
They're
true. That
hungry,
is true.
they're hungry. They're hungry and they're hungry for milk.
I
It's
never, it's funny. I never thought about it that way. I knew I needed it, but I really like that you brought that up. And I mean, this is one thing reasons why you're on here. Yeah, I mean, it really was for me that like that wanting to, yeah, for him to do that, for me to have that sense of like purpose, something that someone actually wanted me in a sense, and I felt like I needed to give back when he did something for me. So yeah, I ended up busting my ass and becoming one of the great players. But that's cool. I
love
mean,
it.
that kind of opened it up for me right now as we speak. So
Yeah, and I
thank you
think
for letting me see it that way now.
yeah, I mean, I think in what we do too in fitness, we run into that a lot with clients who want to stop or give up or quit. So it's I think it's important to hold that space, and a really good coach can help someone through that moment. They have like um the the skills to be able to help somebody. So I think it not only applies to youth but adult. We work with a lot of adults too, so that's really good.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. I know from a story, I'll share like a quick anecdotal before we move on. Like
Yeah.
my school coach came to me. It was before one of my biggest seasons. I was a junior going into senior year of high school varsity. So I had a great junior season, and I had a lot of moderate to high success, but not quite where you're in like the elite category yet. So we're just like scratching the surface of talent. And I had gotten a job, and obviously I'm getting older. you're getting into high school. One of the things that's funny that they say is, don't push a kid when they're a youth, because wait until they start driving, get a girlfriend, learn. There's other things that happen, right, as you get older, and life stuff. So, a kid can be a phenom at like 8, but doesn't mean necessarily at 18, right? So that's why it's not good to go too crazy without getting like too technical in our
Yeah.
coach language, like, because you don't know what's going to happen when the kid's 16, 18. Anyway, to fast forward, I didn't want to wrestle my senior year. Coach comes to my house. Coach has me come in the car, like sit with him, because you could do this back then, obviously. And he's like, listen, you have the rest of your life to work any type of job you want. You have the rest of your life to make money. You only have a small window to become, section champion. That's like county qualifier type of thing. And, try to make a run at going to the state tournament and accomplishing all these things you told me that you wanted to do. And I just never thought of it that way. And I was like, maybe he's right. And maybe this isn't like my best use of time. Maybe I should, get some hours back and work things out. But it was just like I really was like set on not wrestling. I wouldn't even have been here. Not a lot of people know that story as well, but it happened. A coach came and was like, listen, if you need anything, I'll be there for you and we'll figure it out. We'll get you, some sort of extra money financially, whatever we got to do to work it out. And it wasn't just that. It was just, I was so set on like, oh, work. When you get older, you're in high school, you're like, oh, money. Like, this money's not life changing. Whereas sport, you only have a small window. So the last thing I'll say is what I tell the guys, especially in college, is like, you have a small window to be great. You have a small window to compete. Like, parties, all this stuff is going to be there after college. So why not take this window that you have your time to do the best and maximize it? Because you're not going to be this age in this type of environment, with these types of training partners for very long. And that's kind of where that philosophy started to develop, was in that moment where that coach pulled me aside, hit me with the reality check.
How was your year after that?
Great.
It was like,
Yeah.
see what I would when I kick some ass.
Yeah, a lot of winning, a lot of pinning, I became a high school All-American that spring. So I
That's
was
awesome.
just really had a lot of momentum. And that's a big thing we can talk about, is momentum. So you need that as a combat athlete. You need momentum on your side when you're like climbing. That helps you. It's like right place, right time type of thing. We can get
Yeah,
it.
go into that. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Like, what do you
So,
mean by momentum?
for example, like Alex Pereira in the UFC, he's like the 2-time heavyweight. He's light heavyweight, middleweight. Now he wants to take a shot. He has momentum on his side, and so you have to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak, in your career. Like, I can use a lot of these guys, like a Moicano. A lot of these UFC fighters they need to strike while the iron is hot, while their brand and their business is booming, because you're not getting younger. Like the wind, it's like if you're old enough to remember, of course, you flip the sand over. Board game,
Yep.
the hourglass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So everybody thinks they have time. It's a great paradox. Like, nobody has, we don't, like, there is no tomorrow. There is not enough. Like, the time is today. The time is now to get better, to improve. Not next week, not next year. Who knows what's going to happen? You can have a kid, get sick, you can move. That's a little bit about
Yeah.
my.
What do you think creates momentum for anybody?
It's a good question, Chris. Habits. Like I love the book Atomic Habits. There's a lot of great stuff out there about habit forming, compounding every day. Your habits and your beliefs really dictate your future. So really dialing in, that's where we start talking about the process. And, falling in love with the process, because eventually, the process will start to love you back.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
very
a good one.
true. I love that. I want to go back a little bit, actually, just because I am interested in you as a person, because I see how passionate you are about this, and then you talked about that turning point about, from your coach. But take me a little bit further back. Like you said, you started around 6 or 8 boxing because you saw your brother. Is that correct, right? But what kept you going? Because at that point, like you just said, our mindsets are very different. As a kid, we don't really think like you're thinking now. What is it that one thing that actually kept you going? Continuing to box, continuing to do all these combat sports or other sports. Like, what was that drive for you?
an innate drive to be great, just challenging myself. I just wanted to get. I understood the value in challenging myself, and for me, it was just like a vehicle to work really hard. If it wasn't for athletics, I really wouldn't have done anything academically because my interest wasn't there. But I always was drawn towards physical culture. Let's call it physical activity. I mean, in middle school, I had my grandfather, who's a plumber, build us a pull-up bar out of PVC pipe, like
Oh,
homemade,
that's cool.
in our backyard, which was there is no backyards in here. So just to give you
Yeah.
guys, and then obviously you have the influence. Everybody around me was physically active, so it was the norm. So I mean, I'm just seeing other kids in our neighborhood and people we grew up with. And again, my brother's 5, 6 years older than me, so we're hanging out, and I'm the youngest guy playing sports with these guys and doing physical stuff. And again, it's the '90s. WWE is a hit. You know,
Yeah,
fake wrestling in the backyard, which I have a lot of respect for those guys. And I know a lot of wrestlers,
it's
amateur, don't like.
intense.
Yeah, a lot of people have a lot to say, but if their training is legit and they're athletes in their own right,
I agree.
so everyone's like, "Oh, fake."
Yep.
I'm like, "No, those flips are not fake.
Yeah.
They're doing a different thing though than
And
we're."
what was the movie with Zac Efron? I think that
Oh, that was good.
and you kind of see like how physical their the sport was and their training was.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
The Iron
Claw.
Claw.
I watched it in bits and pieces. That's the thing, right? It's hard for me nowadays, and I'm sure you guys can relate with the schedule. It's like,
Yeah.
We were just talking about that. Yeah.
what do you get? Do you guys get? It's more series, or you guys get into like watching something straight through?
No, I could never sit down. There's no way. I never
Like, I
watched
actually-
anything through.
You what?
I love movies, like,
Mm.
and I miss that we don't have our iconic movies anymore. I mean, you guys are now like, I used to really enjoy movies, like get into that.
Mhm.
It's obviously different now. We don't have like blockbusters, and going
Yeah.
back to the movie theater was a big part of our life. Going
Yeah.
to the movies with friends, doing the
Yeah.
whole popcorn and slushy thing. He wanted to go back. Like, I'll go way back if you want. Like,
That's funny.
it's good for the pod. Like,
Some
I'm
good-
down to talk about whatever. But yeah, I think we were going back. Physical culture drew me in. I didn't start wrestling organized until late 8th grade. I actually missed the tryouts for modified. So prior to that, I was just like dabbling in boxing, flag like football, basketball, regular sports. But I didn't start wrestling until 9th grade on like in an organized fashion. So realistically, like I was thrown into the fire, and I just really just picked up on it right away because of like I think my prior experience and training at that point. I don't know, we can call it training. I mean, but it's just activities. So then I just ran with it. I just kind of ran with it from there. And I'll be real with you guys. Like, I'm like a first generation wrestler, so I didn't have like a lot of people have like 3 generations, like their grandparents did it, their uncle did it.
Mm.
So I had to figure all of it out on my own, and that's what kind of leads me to where we're at now with the training program, with the coaching. I had to figure out this stuff pre tick tick, pre AIG, pre the YouTubes. Like, I'm with the DVD. I got the newspaper. I'm going to the library. I'm getting journals. I'm getting publications in 11th grade, like the Journal of Sports Medicine. Like, I'm trying to find data.
That's amazing.
So I have to try to figure out all this. How do I reach my goals?
You were hungry for it. It sounds like.
I knew I had to. You can only get so much with 2 hours in the wrestling room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had to figure it out some way. Oh look, like what's his name? Riddick Bowe was running the hills. Like, oh, maybe I should run the hills. Like, it wasn't the Stone Ages, but again, people don't realize how far fitness and strength and conditioning has come. There was
Absolutely.
not information. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. The information that's out now is just incredible compared.
Okay,
What was it?
that it's too much. We shifted the pendulum. Overload.
I feel like it's funny because we kind of talked about it last time, where I feel like the more, like you say, the pendulum swings, there's gonna be a certain point in time where it's gonna like people are gonna start swinging it back. You
Hmm.
see that a lot in trends, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, we've talked about how social media has impacted obviously the fitness space and any space, athletic space, for both good and bad. From our perspective, I think it's a little more bad, but it's funny because we're actually also trying to spread some good here.
Hmm.
What do you think? I mean, what's your take? What do you see out there in terms of like your realm? How is social media impacting your athletes? How is it impacting you?
Oh,
How is
that's a
it
good
impacting the
one.
coaches?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great question, and it's a loaded one.
A whole podcast episode on that, right?
All right, so let me say this: Instagram and social media rewards attention and the bells and whistles. A sport like wrestling, fitness, the basics win. Brilliance with the basics. Simple things done savagely well. Building a strength foundation, increasing your aerobic base. Do you guys remember those like Wonder Balls we used to get? Like the prize, like the little prize, the chocolate prize. They were in like, or like a candy in the cereal box.
Oh
You
yeah,
guys,
yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yep.
or like the prize. There is no prize. That's what people don't need to understand.
Mm,
Depth. Like the reality is that it's fundamentals, it's overtime, and we have to stick with certain basic fundamentals, and we can rotate like exercise variety, changing your environment, working through visualization, working through breathing, things like that, or recovery methods. But we still need to like revolve around the hinge. We still need to revolve around the squat. We still need to revolve around push, pull, and carry. Fundamental movement patterns. The way we dress it up and deliver it will obviously change based on for you guys the client. But no, we need to have these fundamentals. So unfortunately, social media and the world we live in now rewards the bells and whistles. Your 9-year-old doesn't need to be jogging around cones or doing the agility ladder as a football. Like he needs to be doing fundamental calisthenics, playing tag with his friends, maybe doing some skips on the jump rope, and going for a hike with his family on Sunday. Does not need
Exactly.
anything specialized or insane.
yeah,
So
that's good.
I stay strongly on this, and it's necessary because there's a lot of parents who are chasing the scholarship. But if you look at the data and like we can link it, it's on the NCAA's website. Like the 3% of high school wrestlers wrestle in college, 1% go to Division One. So more likely than not, for my sport, your child is not going to be wrestling in college, statistically speaking. So where does that leave us? I guess at the high school coach, we have to imprint more life lessons and also lead them with healthy habits and what they're going to do as an adult in college and work. So it's a loaded thing. It's a loaded question, definitely. So I think social media is negative for children and especially younger athletes. And if you're the competitor, you really shouldn't be on social media. You, me, Chris, we should be on there. Coaches, but something you need to avoid is the fan mentality, worrying about where they're from in the state. Are they from Fresno? Are they from the Bay? Are they from LA? Who's their coach? Did his brother wrestle? Oh wow, he's got really nice shoes. Oh, he's got. So the whole mentality of comparing ourselves to others, even though it is a combat sport for wrestling's sake, is the worst mentality you can have. And social media only enhances that.
Yep.
And so you need to stay off. If you're the athlete, if you're the competitor, you need to stay off. If you're the gym owner or the coach, you need to stay on.
I
Yeah.
like that.
That's the nuance there.
Yeah. So I mean, we haven't really said this yet, but we've
Talk.
had we've had some guests on the podcast before. We had a bodybuilding coach. We had a physical therapist. We've had someone that's worked with General Pop. So as someone who is,
Great.
takes like an athletic approach and has more of an athletic mindset, especially for our listeners, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on and get your perspective on these things because, whether or not they have kids, just the average person listening to this too, I think can benefit from the knowledge of someone who might have an athletic approach as much as Mike and I can as trainers and incorporating that into what we do with our clients. Yeah, we're excited that we get to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me, and I really appreciate your time. That's the big thing is time. So let's talk about time. If we're a population client, you're looking to get into shape, you're looking to lose weight, you're looking to get healthier. Maybe your doctor just said, hey, you need to exercise more, and you don't know where to begin. So maybe you reach out to Chris, you see these guys on the floor, set up an appointment. You only have so much time in the gym, or it doesn't need to necessarily be in the gym, it could be outside, but you need to maximize your time in there. And the basic compound movements, calisthenics, these are going to be things that have the biggest return on your investment. For our finance folks, ROI, we need to talk about training economy, and we don't have all day and night to stay in a gym. And I actually helped a client and close friend, Harrison. I helped him to compete in the NPC as like an amateur, natural physique competitor. So I have experience with bodybuilders, and it's different but similar in the sense it's aesthetics, it's weight class, it has a lot of similar overlap to the combat sports, but point being is, yeah, you got to use big compound movements, squats, bench, variations, push, pull, carry, we talked about earlier. Walking. I think walking is a great thing. Like you're doing the steps. I think if you've never exercised before and you're just coming off a long layoff, starting with walking is a great place to start to build the habit. We alluded to that earlier, habits. Got to build habits. It's all,
Yep.
so yeah, I think taking a more athletic, and then it's just fun, right? I don't know about you guys, but 3 sets of 10, I'm going to be falling asleep if that's every
Yeah.
rep rack, right?
That's what I say. Athletic-based training, performance-based training is what I like to say. I think it's more fun. That's why I enjoy it. And then a lot of my clients also, once they finally get into it, they see the benefit. But I love what you're saying because as our podcast, yes, it's probably a little more gen pop. But even though coming from you speaking to our clients or our listeners, you guys are hearing him, he's obviously more based off athletics, but you still hear him talking about the stuff we talk about, right? Compound movements, push, pull, legs, carry, squat, hinge, all these things that you guys have heard us talk about. So I think it's really important that you guys are hearing this, that, this benefits a lot of people. Well, benefits everyone. The going back to the basics is what actually is what we preach. We preach a lot the basics, and sometimes you could look at our programming and it could seem like boring, but at the same time it's like, well, that's what works. That's what actually gets people results and gets them to to the goal that they want to.
Yeah. And even, when we had our bodybuilding coach on, that came back to the same thing. So it's funny how this just keeps getting reiterated, even in different modalities, that the basics are what do that. And I think part of the reason that we keep having this conversation and re-emphasizing this is back to what you were just saying, is social media tends to emphasize like the extremes and,
Flashy.
The flashy, and, it takes people's eyes off the ball of doing the basics. So the more that we can just help reiterate that and, have someone with your level of expertise help, hopefully the message gets through that, that those things are what make the biggest difference.
Definitely. And I have programming that I do. I do it through the Train Aerobic app. I have my Warrior training program, which is essentially tailored as a preseason approach for
I was
wrestlers
about to ask you.
getting into it. And a lot of the program I'm doing, again, for the listeners, is they're athletes, but it's following these fundamental principles. The difference is that as an athlete, you have, let's say, 3 phases, off season, preseason, in season. So it's going to change based on the season. And then we have to consider the sport. Wrestling has a lot of power, endurance, conditioning aspects. So I need to include a lot more plyometric, explosive-based movements to supplement. And then also just like from a mobility recovery standpoint. So there's more. But again, it's always, for me, I'm an old school guy. It's going to revolve around strength. It's going to revolve around getting stronger. And then just like a pizza, I got to pay homage to an Italian. You put the pepperoni on, you just put little things on, you add little things here and there. But the foundation is strength.
That base, I love that because we repeat that all the time. It's like we always tell our clients, like, yes, you could, account for all these different things, your macros, this and that, all, but like, if you want to see the greatest result, let's just focus on strength. Let's focus on you just getting stronger at these basic compound movements, and you will see some results. So I love that you're saying it because we preach it to our podcast here to our listeners all the time. One thing I do want to get into a little more, because obviously it's your field of expertise. I love that you brought that up about in season, off season. How does training differ? How does that look like, right, for your athletes? And then how can our listeners, what can our listeners take from that, of the off season, in season? How could it, transfer over to them?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna try to help the listeners out the most. I think that there's been this culture of like, and it's been influenced. I don't want to like pigeonhole one category, but like maybe bodybuilding, maybe athletics. Just like I got to get in shape for this vacation, and I got to get in shape for that. And really, that's your in season. So you need to exercise year round. Are you going to be exercising at the same intensity? No, but you need to be consistent, even if it's dropping from 2 to 3 days a week. And to answer the question, like in those different seasons, we will change how many quote unquote strength workouts or workouts we're doing based on the time of the year. But we're still training, and I think we've gotten into this bad mindset of just like stopping, or like this is my bulk season, this is my cutting season. It's a very, very bad cycle. It's very hard to break. But for our listeners, obviously just getting, you got, even if it's just a walking 3 times a week, get your 10,000 steps. You have to stay active. You can't have these periods of sedentary activity. It's not going to be good. And this is coming from from me, sports performance coach, sport coach. Like, trust me, I've learned all these lessons the hard way. So you don't have to, guys.
That's great. Yeah, we talk about that all the time too, and we did a whole thing on bodybuilding, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think, and
Oh,
talking a little
okay.
bit about that, the mindset of like cutting and bulking and
But I'll wrestler, we won't bash them because that's not, we'll talk about the wrestlers and the fighters. They're like, oh, I have to get this fight camp, 12-week fight camp, 8-week
mm,
fight camp, 16-week. No camp. Yes, there's going to be periods where you increase intensity and you utilize periodization, but you need to be in shape all year round, especially if you're a professional, especially if you're getting paid for this. But even for us who aren't, right? Like, you need to have a moderate level of activity, whether that's even just going out and doing, mowing the lawn, doing stuff around the house, carrying things. Like, you need to be in shape to be able to show up for the ones you care about and who you love. And that's why I think is a strong motivator. Um, Maybe for people who are not a bit huge about exercise, maybe you don't do it for you, do it for a family member, do it for your kids, spouse.
I,
That's
uh,
motivation.
on that note, since we're kind of talking about season off season fight camp, you
Mhm.
know, there's and again this could probably be a whole separate podcast. So but with I think when the average person who isn't maybe they don't know wrestling that well, or they may
Mhm.
not know UFC, but one of the big things that gets taken away is this whole idea of like weight cutting. You see the UFC fighters doing it. If you hear like high school, college guys talking, there's this whole focus on this. Um, and so how is that a real thing, or is tell I guess how do you approach that, like in a way that doesn't especially since you're working with guys who are younger, girls who are younger, how do you approach that so it doesn't lead to like a disordered relationship with food for someone for the rest of their life?
Yeah,
It's loaded. I know that's loaded.
that's a great question, and it's something we will have to expand on more so. But I will do my best to answer it for listeners and people who maybe don't have as much experience. So the big thing we want to minimize is between anybody is the emotional link between food and habit, or food and activity. So we want to minimize this emotional link, like using food as a reward or a punishment. I
Mm.
didn't exercise today, I'm not going to eat. Or I exercised a lot today, I'm going to like go home and like, I'm going to eat like 3 boxes of penne. Like,
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's
So
super
we want
common.
to minimize that, right? Our emotional connection to food. We want to look at nutrition as fuel to give us energy for life. Show up for your work, show up for your family, friends. We eating for energy. We're not eating to punish or reward ourselves. So I think that helps with like mitigating the extremism. When it comes to performance and what I do, there's a lot of like, it's ingrained in the culture of like weight cutting and how if I lower to a weight class, I'm going to perform better. It may be true, but in my experience, it's not. And it's because a lot of the athletes are so focused on beating the scale that they forget about beating their opponent or focusing on the tournament in front of them. So their whole desire, say it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the tournament's on Saturday, their goal is to make this number on a scale, this arbitrary number, and they completely forget about who they have to wrestle or what they have to do or things that are in their control, right? Like utilizing techniques to perform. So it's really hard to work on your mindset and work on your strength and conditioning, work on, your recovery when you're just worried about beating this number. And then to go into it, like there's obviously different types of weigh-ins and different things, but there's a more manageable way to do it. So I really am in favor of like the weight management approach. And it's again fundamentally like getting rid of the processed foods, things you recommend to your clients, substituting soda for water or a seltzer or black coffee, increasing your activity just during the day outside of like working out hours. So weight management is more of like a holistic approach versus like this extremism. And I'll be transparent. Like I've done both. I've done it the proper way and know what it's like and know what my performance is like, and I've done it the improper way. So I've done both, and
That's
so I
good.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
hopefully,
mean,
yeah. Go ahead.
it's, no, but I think it's good to do a little bit of myth busting around it too, because, if the average person, they may not know,
And they might have a kid or a nephew or somebody who's involved in the sport. Wrestling
yeah,
is where if a lot of the listeners are local, they're in California. Like high school wrestling is a big thing out there. JUCO.
No, I'm mad that we didn't get wrestling until my senior year at my high school.
Oh man.
mm,
No, well, not well after my senior year. So the year after, my brother, he's a couple years younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
he was able to kind of dabble with it. He never got too into it, but I was so mad. I was like, I would have for sure gone into it. I'm mad just because you said they brought it up.
well, you're gonna
It's
do.
getting big. Well, because it is becoming a lot bigger. I feel like, not just with kids, but even adults. I mean, I feel like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, everything. It's growing. It's really like expanding, and people want to do it more. Which I don't know why, but I include myself. I mean, I've been trying to start myself.
You want to do jujitsu, right?
I do want to do jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome.
What I guess I don't want to change the topic off too much, but I like that you mentioned that because there's, like you said, someone that could have that kid or something like that. I myself would want someone, my children to actually be involved in a combat sport. What do you think is like a good starting point for someone who's never done anything, both as as let's say I have a child and I want him to get into something. Where do I start and what do I do? What does that look like? And then
Yeah,
for an adult as well.
that's a good question. And I actually answered something like this on somebody's school. Like I have a coach who has a school platform, and this question had arose, and I actually just responded to it because I get the notifications today. Age 5 and 6, you could start earlier. I think that the youth wrestling and a good program, which is like mostly based around like games, activity, fun. It's like what we talked about. You want your kid to associate the wrestling with fun and like a place to be, and they want to be there, and so it doesn't need to be this like really structured, organized thing. Just having them even on the mats playing simple games is they're going to start to associate wrestling with fun and activity, right? And also gymnastics, I think, is a great place for kids to start from like a tumbling standpoint,
I
spatial
can see that.
awareness. And then it's an easy thing for the parents because you can bring both kids, boys and girls. So and here's the thing, they might gravitate towards one or the other, and that's okay. But they're going to build up a base, learning their stance, just quick movement, holding their body weight up, just really basic stuff. So I think that's a good place to start. Just youth wrestling, maybe 1 or 2 nights a week, like recreational gymnastics 1 or 2 times a week. You know, Nothing super structured. They don't need that, in my opinion. They need to have improvised play, like impromptu play. Kids need play. They need less structure, in my opinion.
So even if it was like a combat sport, like let's say boxing or jujitsu, if a parent goes to the gym, they want to like see that it's a play focus versus,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think if we're looking at like jiu-jitsu is also a great place to start. They incorporate all this stuff, and the kids' classes are usually sometimes better than the adult classes.
Really?
And I'm like, whoa, like this is great. Yeah, just that focused on like, listen, you need to also there's a lot, like, you need to also focus on improvement and focus on you have to help the kids set goals. There's nothing wrong with winning. You have to tell them that's okay as well. There's nothing wrong with that, but it needs to be more of like a comprehensive approach where it's like you're not burning the kids out. Like, they're just enjoying it. They're learning good technique. The instructor's not showing them a million things. They're not like doing push-ups to death. Like, use common sense. Look for a good culture. Look for good people. The energy when you walk in should be warm and welcoming. Practice, and that they should like introduce themselves to your kid and get a good vibe off them from the jump.
When do you flip the switch, or like when does that change where it becomes more competitive? Because I was watching one of your videos recently, and then you kind of were talking about that, how like kids are starting to spar, they're starting to wrestle with their friend, right? And then it's like, instead of a friendly thing, you use the quote, which I kind of want to bring up here, which you said accountability is not punishment, meaning like you have to remember and tell them like, hey, you have to know how to push yourself, even though that's your friend or something like that. So I guess the question is, when do you make that switch, and then how do we know it's like, okay, it's time to like get them to realize like, hey, you got to step it up. We got to we got to really dial in on this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think elementary age is like the building block years. Middle school, 6th through 8th grade, is like the transition time. I don't think kids need like tournaments every single weekend. But I think in middle school, like maybe let's say 7th and 8th grade, you start to turn the dial a little more on the competitive side, but not all the way up. Like, this is something we don't do well here, and that we need to do a better job. And as here, I mean the U.S. Like, overseas, Eastern Europe, for example, especially going way back, like there we're thinking about like getting guys ready for the Olympics, becoming an Olympic champion. Where here we're focused on being a CA state champion, New York State champ. And then so what? Like, you turn a senior in high school at 17 years old, your life's over, your athletic career is over. But we're so emphasis on these results for like high school, where guys don't end up peaking till college, or even like after college, senior level. I mean, there's plenty of guys this year I was gonna say Tokyo, Paris, who
Okay.
are crushing it in their 40s. And so those other countries, especially the Cubans, they're focused on like a long-term athletic development model. They're focused on building up the qualities. You know, Obviously it's different culturally because it's state sponsored. It's sponsored by the government. But I think we need to stop like thinking like forcing these kids in, like a kid can peak in college, so like their career should have a longevity approach, not just like for high school scholarship, scholarship, scholarship. Because if you go back to what I was talking about earlier, they're unlikely to wrestle in college or play any sport. I mean, let's just say the average number for a high school athlete to play collegiates is like 5%. Some sports are lower, some sports are higher. You can throw up the NCAA data. I think lacrosse is like men's lacrosse is 7%. And then like football is like 2, 3, wrestling 3, like all the levels combined. So D1, JUCO, D2, D3. So point being is like, it's just, we're just too much an over specialization and overemphasis. But that video that I said that about accountability is because our culture has produced this like anti-accountability movement, and kids are starting to associate like a coach holding them to a standard as like punishment, and a standard is not a punishment. That's why coaches should come up with the team to a degree, like what are our standards going to be? So if they don't meet that standard, it's like, hey buddy, you didn't you promised, we all came up with this as a group that we weren't going to be late, we were going to do this. So it's not a rule per se, but it's you didn't meet this standard. So what are you going to do to make it up to us? Put it back on the kid versus like just yelling at them, right? Because they're not going to listen anyway.
No, I love
Especially
that.
if they're getting the
Yeah.
grades.
That made me think of like kind of off top, not really, but it made me think. Have you been seeing all this like stuff of like gentle parenting and things like that?
Oh no.
Different topic, but
I haven't
where
seen
it's
that.
like they're not I mean, yeah, the whole thing is they're not letting their kids be accountable for things that they're doing, right? Let's say he does something or she does something that they're not supposed to, and instead of like telling them, hey, that was wrong and this, it's more of like they want them, they're really gentle about it. They kind of don't get mad at the person, or they don't really react to it. They kind of just let the kid do whatever they want, pretty much. I don't know if you've seen it, but similar concept almost, where it's like, no, I don't. I mean, me personally, people out there listening might not agree, but no, I don't think so. You gotta teach these kids that, like, no, this is how things are. And like you said, keep them accountable for their actions, and let them know that things have consequences in life. And I feel like a lot of people have kind of stirred away from that, and it's a lot. I don't want to get too deep into that topic.
I like though the whole principle of like the accountability is it's mutual, right? It's when, especially when you're talking about your team, it's something, not that you as a coach just say this is what you're going to do and you're going to listen to me, and like you do it you do it with the group, and the team comes up with that, and individuals come up with their own level of accountability. I mean, the most success that we get with our clients is when, they know what their standards are. They know what they want to be held accountable to. And it's almost like, we're just here to help support and uplift them. They, like, let's say I'm working with a client and, they go crazy one weekend and just, completely fall off. I don't have to say you suck. They know that, I have to kind of help. I mean, we're going to talk about it, and like, what did you learn from that? What are you going to do better? But it's not necessarily, yeah, I like that whole idea of it being a mutual partnership.
And that's just one way to do it. Like, right, there's many different methods out there. I change my approach with my program and with my athletes based on the individual's personalities. So I'll be real with the audience. Some kids, they need to be yelled at. Some kids off approach. You need to know the personality of your athlete, their upbringing, their qualities. This is all about building relationships and developing. So that's the real answer. The real answer is it really depends on the individual. Just like
1,000. Yep.
It just depends on in your relationship with them, and that takes time to build. And so, as a coach, are you in like a paternalistic parental role? Yeah, to a degree, but I like to make, the more I can get them involved in the process, the better off our results are going to be. The more I can get, and I think what you guys do and recommend, like food journaling, food tracking, the journaling is powerful. Coming up with ways to like be accountable to your fitness, step counting. This will help our audience very much so, is coming up with ways to measure your progress. Because what I say as a coach is what isn't measured isn't managed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we say it all the time.
we're not tracking, like, if we're not looking at data, like, it's going to be very hard. So I do believe in data. I do believe in metrics, just like businesses do, and as a way to evaluate our clients and our athletes and see where they're at and meet them where they're at and help fill those gaps. But yeah, that's definitely how I feel about it.
You said something that I thought was really interesting right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, to a certain point, that coach, as in yourself, you can be a parent figure almost. Not to get too deep in it, but I kind of want to get into that a little bit, because there's a lot of, I feel like nowadays there is a lot of people, a lot of kids, men, that don't have that that father figure, to say it that way, that male figure in their life. And I feel like as a coach, you're doing something. Just hearing the way you coach these kids and what you're doing and the impact you're having on them is amazing. So thank you for that. But I mean, how important do you think that is in a kid's life, and how do you see it impact them? You're like literally first. I myself always told myself that I want to do something like that as well in athletics, which is, I feel like that's why I never leave it so much. Because, again, going back to how we started this whole thing, I know how much of an impact the coach could have, especially a male figure in someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you see? What are you seeing right now, working with these kids and working with this at the collegiate level? What's the situation and going? Does that make sense? Like, what are you seeing from in that perspective, and how you're impacting them in that? And what do you think we need? In this generation, is it like something that's really needed? Do they need that mentor? Is it how important it is to have a mentor like yourself in their life, a coach like that in their lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot we can break down, and really, it's like from a sociological approach. Really, a lot of parents and a lot of families are dealing with divorce and fathers not being present. And if you look at it statistically, like everyone knows this, Divorce rates like 50% and or more. Don't
It's
have the
higher
debt.
now. Yeah, I think it's higher.
It's got to be like
Yeah.
65%. So okay, so you're coaching a sport, you're dealing with young men, male dominated sport. So you have to think half these kids, that's the situation, right? And obviously back in the day, it was the number was less. And we can't get into all the other factors on this podcast, but yeah, I think that they're become that young men need father figures. They need male role models, and typically they don't have that. And then we're looking at all these behavior issues. We're looking at all these issues in the classroom, in the workplace, is because of the lack of respect for authority, lack of respect for a male figure, and young men need other men to learn from and build from, and that's the reality. And it can't be. And there's some great parents, there's some great single mothers, but you have to understand that they need that role model and they need that guidance because it's not the same substitute. And that's where a combat sport or like one of these activities, even football, can
Yeah,
help
any of
that
these sports.
band of brothers, like building that camaraderie, because it's just the way we communicate from a biological level. We need to be in that type of environment and be around other people who are like us, think like us, talk like us, and it helps us. So, yeah, I don't know why that's taboo or a problem now, but I don't think it should be. I think it needs to be talked about more. And I think a way we can help is by more men going into education, because that could help as well. More teachers that are men, more male teachers is a way to help remedy this solution you're kind of bringing up, because there's not a lot, especially at the elementary school level. Again, the listeners can go look at the data. Like 90% of the elementary teachers are women, and that's fine, but that's ignoring 50% of the population who are boys. And what are we going to do about them? Just that's it? We're just not going to think about them or consider their education or future? So a lot to unpack, but I totally agree with your stance, and there needs to be more awareness of it, frankly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I brought it up. Like you said, it could be a different podcast, but on our podcast, I mean, we like to bring up these topics because I think they're important.
Deep.
We talk about health. We talk about health as well, and
Yeah.
yes, and they're deep. And that's to kind of bring it back to this podcast for you listeners out there. I mean, you guys are hearing it. I've always preached about it myself, and Chris as well. It's like how sports could have a huge impact on your child's life, and I want my kids in sports. I'm not going to try to force them, like Coach is saying here. Coach is saying pretty much, let them have fun with it. But if there's one thing you take from this right now is, man, one of the best things my parents ever did for me was let me play sports. They hands down. It taught me, like you say, this. They were great parents. They taught me a lot. But sports itself and the coaches I had has taught me so much more about life than I could, ever imagine. And I know you have a famous quote that I've been seeing all over. It's like, win on the mat and then win in life, right? So what does that mean? How powerful is that when you tell that to your kids? Like, what do you mean by that? Win on the mat and win in life.
Yeah, that's my motto. I mean, for the program, for training, for everything I do, individual and teams. Like, again, I told you guys this earlier. Like, wrestling is just the vehicle to get us there. So wrestling is just a tool. Wrestling is going to teach us. We've been talking about a lot of accountability, healthy habits, hard work, dedication, discipline, all these intangibles. And here's the thing: you're not going to, in sports in general. That's why parents should get their kids in youth sports and look for good programs that are focused around fitness and are focused around fun and skill development, because the lessons that you learn are going to have a way bigger impact when that child is an adult. So on the mat and on life is we're going to teach them the singles and double legs and the sprawls for our casual listeners, but we're also going to teach them how to be accountable, have respect, be a good sportsmanship, work together cooperatively, and learn to reach a goal setting, right? We always hear this, all this talk about goal setting, all this stuff is really just what's been around in sports for millennia, these topics. And it's just hitting those intangibles, and it's very hard to get those in a classroom. And really, athletics and academics should have this type of relationship where people think, nope, I'm just a sport guy or gal, or no, I'm just, an academic bookworm. I'm a nerd. How about be like the Jack nerd? Be the best in the world. Now
That was
you're
always my goal. Yep, be a Jack nerd.
Jack nerd.
And I love that because I always wanted to be that.
they're not mutually exclusive, and the best people are like, look at the best athletes like of all time. Like look at Kobe Bryant. Look at some of these people. They have a very cerebral approach to the sport, to their craft.
They have that Mamba mentality, that mental
It
toughness.
was only right. You guys are over there in LA. Got to bring up the
Yeah.
lake. That was one of my favorites right there.
But yeah, I mean, perfect segue here. I mean, like you said, this is teaching our kids all this and how great it could be, accountability and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And the greatest thing I think that it taught me, and really the reason why you're on the podcast is, I mean, it taught me mental toughness. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, I want to know. I mean, from your perspective, how do you build that? I know you get that question or not, but I'd love to hear your answer. And now that we have you live, I want to hear straight from you.
Yeah, mental toughness, right? How to build it. It's definitely, I think, a two factor. It's environmental and it's genetic. Okay, so you can build it. It is something that is buildable. It's
Mm-hmm.
malleable. It's buildable, and because I've seen it firsthand, I didn't always think that. So I didn't always think that. I always thought it was something innate you're born with. But
Hmm.
I've seen incredible, and I mean incredible transformations. Like we've taken a kid who's timid, shy, weak, ninth grader,
Huh.
like a rock star by 12th grade. You wouldn't even know they're the same kid.
That was
Same
me.
at the college level. I've seen it with people. I've seen transformations happen, and it's through the focusing on the process, focusing on the mental and physical qualities you need to be successful. But how to build the mental toughness? The $1 million question. You have to get outside your comfort zone. I would challenge yourself to build the habit for 30 days to do something you're uncomfortable with. Typically, the number one fear of Americans, it might have changed, was public speaking. So a
Hmm.
lot of people can improve public speaking, right? Speaking in front of a group, speaking in front of other people. Another thing that they could do is like learning a language, right? Or playing chess or learning a new recipe. So it doesn't need to necessarily be training based because some people have a high pain tolerance. So if you have a high pain tolerance, maybe quote punishing yourself with exercise is not going to be the remedy to build your mental toughness, but you talking to a stranger might make you shake in your boots. So
Mm.
that for that individual in that circumstance, and this is where everything comes from self-reflection, self-mastery. So before you even go on like a mental training journey, and you need to know yourself. You need to know your strengths, your weaknesses, what you're good at, what makes you tick, and learn to know yourself. And then you can build on to these more depth and in-depth topics, right? But ultimately, mental toughness. Give yourself 30 days. Do something uncomfortable every day. Get the old school calendar out that comes in the mail. Tape it on. Day one, day two. Okay, learn a new Spanish word. Okay, talk to a stranger at the grocery store. Okay, finish 10 pages. And just by doing these things, they compound. And by day 30, you're going to look back and be like, wow, look at all these new skills that I've learned and look how much stronger I've become because the person you were then is not going to be who you are now. So
Mm.
that's would be my first step. 30 days of discomfort.
That's great. I
It
love that. I
builds
mean,
confidence too.
yeah. I mean, for even an adult that's listening, just to be able to build that mental toughness, and we talk a lot about just fitness, but outside of the gym, you know, those things will transform your life.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we do, right? That's what we're looking to
Yeah.
do.
That's what I was about to say. Is that's what the whole purpose why we do this is because of that.
Life lifted.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I always said it's like, I mean, I'm sure you could relate. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm helping these people, change their bodies, but realistically, deep down inside, it's like changing their life, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're literally changing their life. Getting people out of those holes that they're in. Out of depression. When our last one, we talked about how all this could actually get these people. It was specifically towards men, but people out of depression, man. How much of an impact physical activity could be on someone's life is insane, and how much it could change their mindset is crazy. And I mean, you're seeing it firsthand with all the even like you said, not just adults, but these children is awesome, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, on that note, just yeah, fitness I always believed is like speaking of another vehicle, it's like you know how when we were growing up, it was always like we heard this term gateway drug.
Oh yeah.
Gateway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fitness is the gateway to self-improvement.
Ooh,
So
say that
through
again.
our journey, fitness is going to be what brings you from A to B. And when I talk about the journey, it's the process of self-improvement that we're all of us here are on. And who we are last year, last week is not who we are now. Like, So I really think that fitness needs to be looked at just like how I'm talking about wrestling, because not everyone's going to want or needs to be a wrestler. But one of the ways you can boost your self improvement and your journey is by focusing and dialing on your fitness. And these guys helping you with your nutrition and recovery, breath work, all the stuff that goes into being asleep. We didn't even talk about that. Sleep
Yeah.
Oh
is
yeah.
key. But yeah, I think that's the gateway right there. That's where it all gets started. All this
I
stuff.
love that. I'm gonna steal that from you.
That's fine.
I like that.
But you see,
What's well, you said there's two steps though. What's the second step?
second step to the journey,
Yeah.
second step to the process. So yeah, fitness and just getting outside your comfort zone, like we talked about.
I like that. Definitely. That's I mean, that's you guys heard it right here. You know, we're challenging all of you guys. All three of us are challenging you guys to pick something different, pick something out of your comfort zone, something new, a new skill that you can learn. 30 days, like Coach said. You know, we're challenging all of you to go ahead and try that, and we would love to be a part of it. You know, if you guys want to go ahead and email us or tag us on something. What is it that you guys are doing? What is the new skill that you guys are going to learn? And so we could keep each other accountable. I think that's a great thing, an awesome thing. All of us could do here.
Yeah.
Even us three, maybe we might have to do that. Us three, we might have to figure something out.
Yeah, don't wait until January 1st either. Like, do it before the holidays. Try to get something in because, that rush comes on January. But if you can do it now, that'll be even greater, I think.
Yeah, it's always about starting now.
Yeah.
Like you said, why you wait? Because then people always have that, like, oh, I'll start tomorrow. I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes, man. It never does.
My favorite movie, favorite series, Rocky. There is no tomorrow. There is no Apollo. Yeah, Rocky.
That's funny.
There is no Apollo. He had to tell him there is no tomorrow. And they were in L.A. They were in Cali, I think, in that scene. That's where it's really supposed to be in the movie. Like they're on the beach somewhere.
You been out here, by the way? Have you visited?
Yes, I've been on the West Coast, so I've been to LA, and the last time I was there was like 2018, I want to say.
Okay.
And I've been to like Portland, Oregon for a coach's clinic. So yeah, Nike. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
Wolf Stadium. That was pretty cool up there. LA. I mean, yeah, we went down to San Diego. Like I loved San Diego. I like when the beach is adjacent to the mountains. It's very like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, that's
not
what
a
drew.
here. No. You have to go 3
Yeah.
hours upstate.
Upstate New York. That's why my uncle's out there. Yeah.
Oh, in New York?
Yeah, I'm not sure where. Don't ask me where. But he always tells me like, come visit, and I just never go.
Yeah, Chris could tell. I mean, it's definitely different. Being East Coast to West Coast, it's good for you, I think. For my cousin, I think one of the best things was heading out there. I mean, it's just a whole different lifestyle. Talking about comfort zone, going right, moving to new places, and
That is true. That is true.
that's another. That might be a thing for
Yeah.
like new job. Like, say one of the listeners, like maybe you pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has like something they want to do that they're resisting. I think there's something deep down that you want to try, that you want to do, that you put a lot of energy resisting it. And what is it? They say the obstacle is the way. When the what is it? The Star Wars reference, Joseph Campbell, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I think that's also a good way to get on that 30-day challenge, is to think about, whether it's a big move or, like you said, a new job, whatever. There's something deep down that you want to do, and I found like my life completely changed and opened up once I started like breaking down those walls that I was just putting up around the things I wanted to do, and I just always surprise myself, I'm like. I never thought I'd live in California, and then one day I'm like, I'm gonna move. So it's a lot of little stories like that I have. I think that's a cool thing to tune into, as to what do you want to do, but what are you also resisting?
What are you afraid to do? Yeah, we all set up mental barriers.
Yeah,
I mean, the only way to break them is to go right through them, right?
yeah,
I could add this, is that this is something I talk about with the athletes a lot and will help the listeners, is you're going to want to give up. So before a breakthrough is like a breakdown. And this is something we talk about in the season. This typically occurs Wrestling's typically from like October to March or November to February, depending on high school, college, my experience. This happens about midway through. The morale, the energy level is declining. The weather is changing, especially here, and we could talk about that, like our environment. And so the kids are feeling low, so you got to bring them up. You know, you got to build up the morale. You got to boost them up. And it would be nice to have some of that LA,
No.
but
We'll send it over.
yeah, in the mail, please. Thanks. But really though, it's like me telling them and that the breakthrough is coming, and this is the most important part. And if you can get through this, it's like there's like light at the end of the tunnel. Like success is on the other side of this barrier, and I think we've all been there. And I know I have, especially with like new jobs or new things. Like you're trying to learn the systems. When I was younger, especially, like you feel like you want to give up, but it's like in that moment that's the most important moment. And if you can get through it, there's going to be a breakthrough and you're going to be an all-star. You're going to be a high performer. If you can get through that, most people quit though. I'm not going to lie. 90% will quit. 80 to 90% will quit. And if you don't, and you see things through, you will be rewarded in my experience.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I see it in our clients. I usually call it the 5-week fuck it's because at 4 to 5 weeks, people just want to give up when they're starting like a new fitness routine or a diet. That's I think that's a common thing. But there's
30 days.
Yeah,
Around there, 4 or 5 weeks.
exactly. Yeah. So
cool. Nice. I like that. The F. It's the five FFF.
I know.
There you go. So set up your whole system there.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it's a whole system.
That's Well, Coach, it's been great. We keep on talking, obviously, and have multiple conversations. A lot of these topics could be podcasts on their own. And it's funny because some of the stuff we did talk about, we do actually have podcasts that are specified on that subject for any of your listeners out there. If you've done anything that really interested you, obviously check out the show notes. Thank you once again for coming on the show. I feel like we have to have you again. There's some missing things that we didn't talk about that I would love to talk about over with you. Chris?
Yeah, no, thanks. This has been great. Lots of good stuff here.
If you have anything, not to get you out, go for it.
Just life lifted. I love the pod. I love the idea. I'm glad you're bringing awareness about these topics, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. We should do something like this again. Maybe in the spring or winter, we'll set something up again where we can expand a little more. But for people who are looking to follow me, maybe they have a kid or they're thinking about wrestling, at Coach_Coco _COCO. Very easy name to remember. Follow me there. It's my things across the board are the same. It's going to be Coach Coco Wrestling. Facebook, Coach Coco Wrestling. YouTube, Coach Coco Wrestling. So I also have my own website. I have a blog on there where I go a little bit more in depth about some of the stuff I talk about in my emails that I send out. So that's been great. We've had a great response with that. And, anybody's looking to chat, probably the best place to reach is Instagram. Shoot me a direct message. And if you have a question, I'd be happy to, answer and help you guys out and hopefully, make a difference.
Absolutely. You guys heard it at Coach Coco, Coach_Coco on Instagram. That's the best place you could reach him. Go for it. Reach him. Follow him. He has some good content. I love his content. Like you said, you heard him, wrestling coach, right? Also mindset coach, I would say. He's helping Chris out a lot. Chris could go ahead and, talk to you. He's told us about it. He'll probably talk about it on the next podcast a little more as well, how you have been helping him a lot. And that's something that I saw personally firsthand, how much of an impact you're having just on, the things that you're working on. So the system that you have for our listeners to listen to, the system that Coach does have, well, it's working. It's working and it works, and it's a positive impact on people's lives. Anything, Chris?
No, I think you said it real well. Yeah.
Anything, closing thoughts you have, Coach?
No, just that don't forget that the mental and the physical is interconnected, and mental training is just one part of that. So it's got to be a holistic approach. Just like you probably tell the listeners, it's got to be sleep, nutrition, recovery, breath work, form, flexibility. Like it's not just one thing. We're humans. I know AI is getting popular, but We're not robots. We're humans, and we're complex, but we need to approach everything holistically. That's my thoughts.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah, good closing thoughts.
Yep. So as always, guys, thank you guys for listening. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, you could find us at Life with the Podcast on Instagram. You can find Coach at Coach_Coco, like we said, on Instagram. You can find me at Coach Molina on Instagram. Chris
Musser.
on Instagram. And until next time, guys, this has been the Life with the Podcast.
Thank you. Nice, Dallas.